So let's talk about the CBD THC. And this is of personal interest to me because I find that THC specifically helps me tremendously with turning down the volume on the rumination that tends to be associated with really horrible sleep onset insomnia. It tones down the chatter tremendously for me. And I find that, at least subjectively, to be one of the primary reasons it helps me to sleep. However, I've often wondered if I'm taking, say, smaller, what I would consider smaller doses in the forms of edibles, which are then converted through first pass metabolism into other things. But at 2.5 milligrams or 5 milligrams or 7.5 milligrams, am I inhibiting my REM sleep? Coming back to what you said earlier, like sometimes you don't know what you don't know because you're not sort of immediately aware of how much REM sleep you're getting unless you're tracking it using some type of biometric device. Am I screwing myself in the long term by using this aid in the short term? Right. So that's the context. But please, in any way that makes sense, tell us what you know about CBD, THC, and anything else related to this fine plant.
So there's probably more research that we have right now on THC, which is the psychoactive component of cannabis. But there is some fairly interesting data on CBD2 and significantly less data on CBN. For THC, we have a set of cannabinoid receptors in the brain, both what's called the CB1 receptor and the CB2 receptor. The CB1 receptor is the primary one that's expressed in the brain. That's where we think THC is having its sleep effects. And so what we've found, and by the way, if you go back, some of the first writings, the first emergence of this story of THC for sleep, at least from what I found, came from the writings of this brilliant British physician, Dr. Clendining, and he published his first monographs in 1843, I think it was. And if you read it, I think you would love it, Tim. Actually, I should send you some of these
Before
articles.
It was cool. Wow, he was on it.
Before it was cool. And it's like this hemp resin that he was talking about. But just the writing itself, you would love. It's this wonderful, oh gosh, I wish I could write that way. But his writing is lovely and delicious, and I could read it all weekend. But he was the first to describe some soporific and sedating benefits of hemp resin. And then another doctor the same year, O'Shaughnessy, published some evidence too. What we probably know are 4 things related to THC with a possible caveat. The first is that you get a fairly reliable, very nice reduction in the time it takes you to fall asleep. This is just what you're describing too. It seems to have a sedative benefit. And we're starting to unpack and understand exactly why THC has that sort of sedating effect. The next issue, however, isn't quite such rosy news, that you seem to develop tolerance, which is that the same dose, if you're using it chronically, consistently every single night, can, in some individuals, lead to a tolerance that means that you have to increase the dose, and therefore you develop a dependency. And I think the way, if people want to test dependency, would be to say, look, if I have to, let's say, travel internationally, and I obviously don't want to, transit illicit drugs into other countries if they're not legal there, then would I start to just get very anxious? I would think, well, my goodness, I've lost my crutch of THC. And at that point, it probably demonstrates that there is a dependency that you have on it, which I'd prefer or wish for people not to have necessarily. The third feature of THC is that it has quite a significant withdrawal rebound effect. So when people stop using THC, they typically don't just go back to the bad sleep that they were having before. It's often even worse.
Do we have any idea of the dosage range that we're talking about? Right? Because you could develop DT and tremors and so on from alcohol withdrawal, but that's not going to happen if you're having 1 glass of wine per night. So in this particular case with THC, how much does one need to be taking, or do we know, on a consistent, let's just say nightly basis, to experience that type of rebound that would be so harmful to sleep? Do we know?
I wish I had an answer, and we currently just simply don't know. There are
Yeah.
not enough
Okay, got it.
systematic studies. Right now, it's more simply survey
But it's
studies where
observable.
people
Like it can happen.
but it's
Yeah.
it's so observable, it's so reliable, this rebound insomnia withdrawal, that it forms part of the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the sort of psychiatry Bible. It forms part of the criteria symptoms for cannabis withdrawal, this insomnia
Huh.
syndrome. That's how consistent,
Wow.
reliable it is. It's part of the diagnostic criteria. And in fact, often it's the insomnia that happens when you stop using that is one of the prime reasons for remittance, that people will then go back to using it because they just
Yeah.
dislike the insomnia so much. And so,
Go back to the wacky tobacco. They can't stay away.
yeah. And so you you get that. And then the other aspect is that it seems to quite significantly disrupt your REM sleep. And it does it in
Mm-hmm.
three ways. The first is that it will decrease the overall amount of REM sleep that you're getting. The second is that it delays the arrival of the first episode of REM sleep in the cycling nature of sleep. And then the third aspect of that is it seems to decrease the intensity of rapid eye movement sleep. And the way that one of the ways that we measure that is just how many of these eye movements. That's where it gets its name, by the way, rapid eye movement sleep, because your eyes dart back and forth. And the more of those rapid eye movements that you're having, the more intense the REM sleep. And in fact, the more intense the dreaming. And THC will decrease the intensity, that metric of REM sleep too. I think perhaps the more powerful piece of evidence for me, looking at the literature, that it is REM sleep disruptive is less about the amount or the quality of the REM sleep as you're using, but what happens when you stop using, which is all of a sudden you get a rebound effect where you start to get significantly more REM sleep when you stop using THC. And that's a demonstration as scientists that we would say is a homeostatic response, which is that if you deprive yourself of something, when you get the chance to get it, you get an increase in the amount. There is a response. And that increase, that homeostatic rebound effect, is usually a sign of a deficiency that's been happening before that.